What is going on here, folks? Finally, I had to cancel one of the lives, my friends. Unfortunately, I was supposed to turn the phone the other way, which I had, and now we're going to have to go, what is this, vertical? No, horizontal. Anyway, thank you for joining me, everyone. Welcome. Actually, I'm going to wait for you amazing people to get on the live here, folks, with me and Wolfie that's behind me, right there. As a matter of fact, actually, I got to let him out the door, one of the doors here. One sec, my friends. Okay. Come on, let's go. Right. I'm sorry about that, everybody. We're going to get into the IDAHO4 case today. That's right. Once again, for all you IDAHO4 true crime junkies, my name is Jason, of course, and I go by ESTEY'S Crime Maze. That's right. Let's talk about the staged crime scene, my friends, because I think it's undoubtedly, there's no doubt about it. Wasn't this crime scene staged, everyone? I mean, they didn't treat, as I keep saying in my videos, they didn't treat it like a biohazard, right, everybody? And by the way, thank you to all of you, first of all, of course, as I say in my videos, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for smashing that like button. And those of you that hit the bell icon too, at times to be notified for future videos, getting the videos ultimately out to you guys and gals out there. And thank you, all of you that have chosen to leave me a comment. I guess, and I always say I appreciate the engagement. And thank you, those of you that have shared my videos as well. I've had fun exposing a certain YouTube creator out there, by the way, you know, Jay Embry. You can see, my friends, Jay Embry, he's got this huge channel now, partly because he's done hundreds and hundreds of videos. And what's his hundreds and hundreds of videos? What's his narrative? First of all, he wants to free Brian Kohberger, he tells you. I mean, anybody with reason, logic, common sense, I mean, I totally agree. Brian Kohberger had nothing to do with the crime, right? But then what's Jay Embry's narrative? He's trying to seemingly convince all of us, you and I and the public, that what? He's going along with the FBI narrative that you know, the atrocity happened, right? We got to just believe Jay Embry that, you know, there was assailants out front. And what he doesn't tell you, my friends, and what he doesn't look at, it was a staged crime scene. And he doesn't look at the fact that, you know what, the feds actually do extraction removal operations. Hello? Yeah, if a confidential informant, most of us, even including Jay Embry, we talk about the confidential, you know, possibly different confidential informants in this case. You know, he wants to surmise that it was Karen Northington, you know, I believe Xana's stepmom, right? And that she snitched on the Aryan family, the Aryan Knights. Well, maybe that's the case. We do know one way or another the students were targeted, even if you think Brian Kohberger did it, right, everyone? But where I think Jay Embry is totally wrong, and I think he knows better. He's got to know better by now. We're in 2025. This happened November 13, 2022. He knows there's been no verifiable evidence, for example, that there was any removal of bodies. Hello? And again, the forensic teams, they didn't treat this like a crime scene, my friends. If it was really a bloody crime scene, if an atrocity really happened, don't you think they would be wearing proper PPE gear? As many people talked about, right? They didn't have gloves on half the time. They didn't have slippers on. They were tracing dirt back and forth with U.S. Marshals, even though some of it by then may have been cleaned up. But my friends, we got to look at it. It's right there in front of our faces. And guess what, my friends? Jay Embry doesn't also tell you, and I've said this on my videos, my friends, and many other YouTube creators should be talking about this, I believe. Bertie mentioned it, I'll give him credit for this, that guess what? Legally, my friends, legally, the feds can stage a violent event if a confidential informant has been compromised. Did you know that, everyone? And I think this relates to the IDAHO4, but you'll never hear that from Jay Embry. And I got to ask, is he a disinformation agent, my friends? Therefore, with his narrative that he puts out, oh, you got to believe him. The Aryan family, the Aryan Knights took out, they did these stabbings, all successful, got out clean, left 2 roommates alive. They intimidated Bethany Funkadilla Mortison. That's basically what he tells you, that he believes. They intimidated them, so they didn't call the 911 for 8 or 9 hours. That's what he wants you to believe, apparently, my friends. No, reason, logic, common sense would infer, in my opinion, the feds would have debriefed Bethany and Dylan, told them in no uncertain terms, don't call 911. And they would have done it either that night, or even this could have been somewhat pre-planned, this extraction operation, my friends. And certainly, I think the extraction took place, obviously, in the cover of darkness. It was a real operation, my friends. But Jay Embry wants you to believe that operation out front, the people out front, the dumpster guy, another guy on a cell phone. Eventually, if we believe the audio, it sounds like somebody was, chambering a gun, as Jay Embry plays. But that wasn't assailants. That was the feds. That was the feds conducting their PSYOP and staging an actual extraction operation at some point, getting those 4 students out. And now they're protected under the WITSEC program. Jay Embry mentions the WITSEC program, my friends, but he doesn't tell you that it's protecting those 4 students. He tells you the opposite. And I think he's dead wrong, my friends. You need Jesus, man. Thank you, amigo. I appreciate that, dude. I need Jesus. We all need Jesus. I'm trying to see if I can leave a hello or a hi to you guys. Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry, everyone. I've had very little success with the few YouTube lives that I've done, in part because most people don't even, I guess they're not even being notified half the time when I'm doing the odd YouTube live. I want to do more YouTube lives, everyone. And today, unfortunately, they claimed I didn't have the camera around properly. I thought I did. So now we're having to go, I think it's called vertical. Anyway, it is what it is, right, everyone? And I'm sorry, I also had to cancel one of the lives here. So that didn't help. And also, my friends, when I post these lives, my face is actually blurred. Hello? Yeah. And it's apparently because the internet connection. So somehow I have to resolve this. We'll figure it out eventually, my friends. But thank you again for being on this live so far. I really appreciate it. And again, everyone, it amazes me how many YouTubers that are on this case of the IDAHO4. It seems like 95% of them, they actually still believe this PSYOP. They actually believe somehow an atrocity took place just because we've been told this, right? Okay, normally in a tragedy, whether it be in a house or whatever, normally you could trust, I guess, corporate media if they say a quadruple homicide, for example, happened, right, everyone? But there would be evidence of it, right? Again, my friends, in unalivings such as this, you would have leaked crime scene footage, raw crime scene footage, right, everyone? But there's been none of that. Absolutely none. Excuse me, my friends. I gotta leave. Let the dog in. 1 sec. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm an animal lover. Yes, I am. Dude, just because you have a different opinion doesn't mean you have to demonize him. You need better internet, or you need to move your router to better location. Thank you for that advice. And by the way, I'm not demonizing Jay Embry. I could use much stronger language. But I put the question out there, who is this guy? He comes out of the ether, by the way. I mean, it just blows my mind how so many people seemingly blindly, they just, I think they're getting conned, personally. I mean, we got to ask that question. I mean, who is Jay Embry? Why is he pushing out? And many people do. He pushes out that this atrocity happened with no evidence to support it, other than we know the coroner made a public statement, right? But we could pick apart Kathleen Babbitt, the coroner. Many people have. She's probably bought and paid for. She oddly describes Xander Canoodle's behavior, that she was fighting for her life. and then admits, tries to tell you that Kaylee Gonzalez had different injuries. And by the way, this Jay Embry, you know, I noticed in one of his videos, he's going over, you know, Steve G. Like, again, we're supposed to believe Steve G, the father, that these atrocities happened to his daughter and the other three. And what Jay Embry doesn't tell you, I think it's quite clear as day that Steve G, he looks like a Fed. He is a Fed, most likely. He signed a non-disclosure probably with the FBI to put out this emotionally charged narrative, in my opinion, to release a certain amount of information, but not blow the whole case wide open. But sometimes he talks too much, by the way, my friends. You know, Steve G admitted, I said in one of my videos, Jay Embry hasn't told you this, I don't think. Steve G admitted they had surveillance on the house. Actually, I think Jay Embry talked about it in so many words, but he said Embry claimed that they didn't have enough security, that the feds just provided on purpose just enough security, he thought, to make the families feel more comfortable. In other words, he was saying, and I think he actually added to this, that, well, he didn't think the threat, or the feds didn't think the threat was, you know, high enough. Are you kidding me? Not only did they have surveillance, they had patrols. They had agents in the neighborhood. This has been talked about, everyone. We can't prove this for sure, but there's been a hell of a lot of talk that they had that house wired, my friends. And why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't the feds know everything basically that was going on? If a confidential informant, which probably did live in the house, probably was Bethany Funk, could have been Kaylee Gonzalez, as I've surmised as well, my friends. Absolutely, the feds would know potentially those students are majorly at risk. So they would have prepared and they would have did their job. Not that it's easy, but they would have went in there guns blazing that night, and I believe they extracted those students. But you're not hearing any of that. And Jay Embry will not interview somebody like me, who's on the extraction operation theory, who's trying to connect the dots, along with others. I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the few. Because again, I think just most people, and I bought into it as well, my friends. Certainly I'm not perfect. For a year and a half, I bought into this hideous lie, I believe, from the law enforcement, FBI, just being told, we got to believe them that an atrocity took place. We'll put crime scene tape, right? And we'll put badges on when they're moving the boxes out. Just believe that that's an authentic crime scene. What a bunch of horse pucky that is. They didn't treat that crime scene like a biohazard, my friends, as many people have said. Tax Max says, I mean, you have a point. There have been a few creators that have been proven to be plants since all this happened. Exactly. Thank you, Tax Max. What does a Fed look like? Why would he sign a non-disclosure with the Feds to put out a narrative like if he is a Fed? Well, I'll answer that question. That's from 4B5 ERD. I think because it's clear, my friends, Steve G, you see, the feds, again, everyone, instead of telling us the truth that they rescued these students, the feds did their job. Let's give them credit, I believe. They extracted these students. They're relocated probably out of the country. They're protected under the WITSIC program. So they want Steve G. In my opinion, again, for legal reasons, I'll say this. In my opinion, they're using Steve G. and Christy Gonzalez at the time, his lovely wife, and their lovely daughter. They're just going along with the script, in my opinion. They're like actors right now, okay? And you see it. You can hear it, everyone. They're putting an emotionally charged narrative to try to make you think that an atrocity happened. And you can't trust Steve G., in my opinion, everybody, also because he's trying to convince you, apparently, that Brian Kohberger, he's convinced, did the crime. I mean, come on. Or one of the perps. I mean, it's ridiculous. There are no perps in this, my friends. The atrocity did not happen. There's not one shred of evidence to show that this crime scene happened, my friends. It's just crime scene tape, largely, right? Again, you get a forensic team eventually to go in there. By the way, we know one of the first cops on the scene, it wasn't until, 8 hours or something, right? The chief investigator, the first investigator in charge of the case. What's his name? You guys can leave me the comment. I can't believe I forget his name. He's got, 2 years experience on the job. Are you kidding me? And he was caught lying in the hearings, my friends. It's all a total psyop. So I like that person who left the question about certain YouTubers, oh yeah, tax max facts, thunderclap. I mean, you have a point, he says. There have been a few creators that have been proven to be plants since all this happened. And that's why everyone, I'm asking the question, I think we should ask it, some of us. Who are people like Jay Embry? Again, hundreds of videos, everyone. Think about it. He wants to free Brian Kohberger, but if you're let's just theoretically, if you're a disinformation agent, wouldn't you possibly, and if you're guided by the Fed, you're going to, get a lot of people supporting you because you want to get justice. You're going to show people that hopefully that Brian Kohberger had nothing to do with this so-called atrocity. But at the same token, wouldn't you want to convince people, if you're working for some organization, let's say a 3-letter agency like FBI even, right? Wouldn't you want to also convince people somehow, but you got no evidence to do it, the atrocity took place, and actually put out, according to Jay Embry, the Aryan family, the Aryan Knights, elements of them actually took out this hit? He's got no emotion behind him. Except I hear a little bit of anger here and there. But by the way, my friends, this creator, Jay Embry, and he's got a big, huge platform community. Go support him if you want. I'm not saying don't, everyone. It's up to you. But let's just talk facts here. When he mentioned about Steve G's comments that Kaylee's nose was busted in, broken by an assailant, we're supposed to believe that. It didn't happen, in my opinion, my friends. You don't have to feel sad, demoralized, in my opinion. But Jay Embry, everyone, he didn't talk with emotion. And he said that, it wasn't, he described some weapon that it wouldn't have been that weapon. It would have been a gun, a butt of a gun, with absolutely no sympathy, emotion behind that statement, my friends. If you really believe that poor Kaylee Gonzalez, this beautiful, vivacious, intelligent woman, was brutally, savagely beaten, there was none of that behind his voice, everyone. Please pay attention. It's crazy. Huge red flags, in my opinion. I'm just going to let this dog go. 1 second, everyone. This is beautiful doozy, I call her, real name Moon. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, I guess she doesn't want out after all, folks. Hey. Oh, just a sec. Come on. Okay. Sorry, everyone. We won't stay too long in this live. The dogs, they're not sure what to do. It's so hot, brutally hot here, my friends. But anyway, my friends, this wasn't supposed to be just a live on Jay Embry. It was to go into the staged crime scene. But that's what he doesn't talk about largely, my friends. He'll admit the 911 call was coerced, but where's the talk of the actual staged crime scene? It's absurd. My username is absurd. 45erd is absurd is the name. Thank you, absurd. I appreciate it. Thank you, absurd. Why would BF? Great questions here. You guys are amazing. This community of mine. Why would BF be a CI and not the target of the extraction? Now, I've had that question before, and I love that question. But before I answer that question, again, I think Steve G signed a non-disclosure to answer another question because, again, he is a Fed and that his assignment right now, Steve G is, and he's agreed to it. I think he should shut his mouth because it's all lies, in my opinion. But his assignment, I believe, is to give you just enough information and this disinformation lies, I believe, to try to convince the public that an atrocity took place, this quadruple homicide, when it didn't. It did not happen. There's no evidence to support that it happens. There's more circumstantial evidence, I would argue, if you connect the dots. Again, the feds extracted these students, everyone. These federal programs, by the way, actually exist, and they had surveillance around the house. Steve G admitted it. He told you too much. Okay? Sometimes, him and his wife tell you too much. They probably should have said that. What does a Fed look like? Why would he sign? Yeah, and by the way, I'll get to the Bethany Funk, my friends, as a CI and why they didn't target, I guess, Bethany and Dylan, for example, right? The surviving roommates. Well, let's get to that now. I don't know exactly, everyone. All I could surmise is since we have not seen those students, the 4, and we've certainly not seen verifiable evidence that their bodies, were taken out of that house. It was a staged crime scene, I believe, everyone. If you just open your eyes, get out of the brainwashing mind control, right? Again, no raw witness testimony, no forensic leaks, again, no material crime scene, no pretrial evidence of bodies, no verifiable removal bodies. So we could go down the list, everyone, okay? I think that the feds knew that those 4 students, for whatever reason, or at least some of them, were targets. And Ethan happened to be there that night. Maybe they knew he was going to be potential collateral damage because he happened to be there. They knew they had to get them out. And for whatever reason, Bethany and Dylan, they were not the targets. Or maybe they weren't even home that night, everyone. I don't even know if we can trust, what came out half the time, that they were on their social media and in the house, right? We were lied at first saying that, of course, that everybody was all asleep, and the victims and the surviving roommates. It's all lies, largely, everyone. Okay? I think the real reality, again, is Dylan and Bethany, they weren't the targets of any hit. And they're very well, I'm saying there probably was a hit being in the works. And the feds absolutely knew it, my friends. There were undercover cops all over the place. Do you actually think, my friends, when you really think about it, do you think the feds would allow somehow on their watch a quadruple homicide to happen with all this surveillance around? And being surveilling the 4 students, they knew what was going on by and large, everyone. There's no way, in my opinion, this could happen. And YouTube creators that keep pushing that it did happen and not being able to back it up, you got to wonder why. Are they just after clicks? Are some of them, again, disinformation agents, like I've suspected a few out there to be? I'm not going to put up with disinformation agents, but I asked the question, Let me just see here, everyone. Sorry, I have questions on your theory. Absurd, no problem. Absolutely, that's okay, man. Why would Bethany be a CI and not the target of the extraction? That's a great question. Again, I think we can only surmise Bethany and Dylan, either they weren't there that night and or they just were not targeted, right? A lot of people, I think it's clear, everyone. I don't know Xander Canoodle's role in all this, other than, first of all, we know Xander Canoodle's mother, Jay Embry and others have talked about it. Her stepmom and husband, they seemingly seem to get a lot of court deals, didn't they, everyone? They got deal after deal, right? And they were trafficking drugs at times. They got arrested for doing hardcore drugs, apparently. And so that was a real reality. And so, yes, the people that say they think they were confidential informants, they very well may have been one of the confidential informants, right? And then to take that next leap and speculate that they may have snitched on elements of the Aryan family, the Aryanites, right? Gangbangers. That could be correct. We don't know. It might be a real reality, everyone. But to take the next step and do hundreds of videos to claim that the Aryan family, Aryanites, were successful in actually doing the hit, there's no evidence to support the hit got carried out, my friends, other than regurgitated lies, in my opinion. And the only visual evidence that even came close, my friends, and it confused me for about a year and a half before I looked at the extraction operation theory, as more people are now, thankfully, is that, but remember, my friends, they put red on the foundation of the house. We're supposed to believe, again, law enforcement and FBI largely, because they took over the case, we're supposed to believe, oh, that's blood. It was such a bloody crime scene. We've never heard anything like this. I don't think anyone. I don't think there's ever been a quadruple unaliving homicide where you got blood seeping out of the foundation of the house. But they needed that to try to convince people, see, this is not a psyop, this is real. And it's probably just pig's blood or paint, right, everyone? As I said in my videos, we know how easy it is for one cop, law enforcement, or a team or forensic scientists to do that, right, in the cover of darkness. Okay? These are my opinions, my friends, but I think the facts back it up and reason, logic, common sense, and a lot of this. Tax Max Facts Thunderclap says, I'm a girl, laugh out loud. I love it. I love girls when they come on here. Thank you. Bot9 says, bro, you lost your mind. Brian Kohberger wouldn't even be on trial with your theory. Really? Are you sure about that? Oh, you're sure? Because The rabbit hole goes deep, my friends. You got to understand how the deep state works. And this being elements of even some of the three-letter agencies out there. Okay, not to mention CIA, that CIA are usually through corporate media. But when it comes to the FBI, my friends, and not all FBI agents are corrupt, right? Some of them do an amazing job. I get it. I understand often, you know, as I said before, CIA, FBI, their mandate really is to lie, deny, and deceive at the expense of American taxpayers often. Sometimes they also have to do it, right, to do their jobs correctly. I get it. We should all get it. But what was that question again? Oh, Brian Kohberger. You see, everyone, I think that Brian Kohberger is a Fed, right? Because the Feds, they often will embed very intelligent people at times in high academic institutions. Anybody can look this up, everyone. This is how they operate. They will do that, and then they will groom them, and they will use them sometimes as a confidential informant, particularly if the Feds are working in, say, a criminal investigation, in this case. They'll embed somebody like a Brian Kohberger. They'll have an absolute dossier on him. They'll know exactly who he is. And by the way, these old universities, my friends, nobody talks about this. I learned this from the great Dr. Shiva. Old universities, like he gave example, Yale, Harvard, but it would be the same with Moscow, Idaho, my friends, old universities like that, and Washington State. The Feds, the university establishment, they will absolutely have a dossier on their students, almost like a control file, right? And they could potentially even blackmail them. But I think Brian Kohberger is on an assignment. And I think it could have been had noble intentions at first. You know, Brian Kohberger could have been helping the Feds with the criminal investigations that was going on. This has only been talked about by a few YouTubers. But regardless, my friends, I think Brian Kohberger, by and large, there was an agreement made. Remember, he wanted to enroll law enforcement, my friends. So I don't think it's a farce to say that he was linked to the intelligence community. And he agreed to be used as perfect distraction in all this, my friends. Yes. And as I talked about with Tommy Jude, everyone, he may not even be in jail. Tommy Jude brought that up, actually. There's no proof he's actually, you know, in a cell. He's certainly not rotting. He's got healthier since he's been so-called in jail, everyone. And that could have been the agreement. And remember, everyone, the Feds, if they groom somebody and they want to control somebody, like for controlled opposition, for example, or a chaos agent, right? Well, often at times they'll feed them drugs. Yeah, I saw this even during COVID when I was a public speaker, my friends. With chaos agents, they will actually drug them up at times so they can control them better. Was that going on with Brian Kohberger? It very well may have. It very well may have. He's off drugs now. Whatever facility the Feds have him in right now, we're supposed to believe he's in jail, he's gotten healthier. Sure, that's how it looks like. Anyway, let me try and release, get this dog out. Moo moo. Hey, oh. So I hope that answers your question, everyone. I know it was a long-winded answer on Brian Kohberger. Let's see if we got some more questions. Why do they want to hurt them? Why do they want to hurt him? Oh, hurt him. Bro, that's my biggest problem with this theory as well. Yeah, I know, my friends. I also had questions about, you know, if Brian Kohberger is used as a patsy, why would he agree to go to jail for what, 2.5 years now at least, right? But again, everyone, this is all behind the scenes, behind the shadows, isn't it? We don't know what facility, again, Brian Kohberger is in, everyone. And I think it is seemingly part of an agreement that Brian Kohberger very well may have made, right? As the perfect fall guy. And again, he wanted to be enrolled in law enforcement. I don't think if we didn't know that he was enrolled in law enforcement or trying to become law enforcement, then I don't know if I would have, you know, speculated that he would have been in on this intelligence operation, everyone, this federal operation. But we know that he had contact with the Feds, the cops, probably FBI. I think that's very reasonable to conclude, everyone, right? Because we know he wanted to be a cop. And now we've seen what's happened to Brian Kohberger. I guess it's possible that Brian didn't know any of this was going to happen, but I have a hard time believing that, my friends. I think he's partly on an assignment. I really do. That's my theory on Brian Kohberger a bit. But he didn't have anything to do with the crime. Can't we just wipe our hands and move on? Brian doesn't fit this theory, game over. Okay, Bot9, maybe you're right. But it was a staged crime scene, Bot9. Why don't you get off Brian Kohberger and hop on to my theory of the extraction operation, baby? There's always a bloody scene picture. There's always a bloody scene picture, that one. Yeah, we haven't seen any bloody crime scene pictures, my friends. Huge red flags in this case because it didn't happen. The atrocity didn't happen, I don't believe. The truth will always be stranger than fiction. Let's not forget that, everyone. Tax-Max, Facts, Thunderclap. And Leash, Leash 23, thank you for being here. She says, why would they do with Brian if found guilty? Well, Brian won't be found guilty. I highly doubt that. They'll probably, as Tommy Jude is strongly suspecting, they'll probably let him off on a technicality, right? Even the judge right now, what's his name, Judge Hitler, right? He's doing all kinds of crazy tyranny rulings right now. Absolute nonsense. Probably it's all scripted, everyone, that they're going to try to get Brian off on a technicality. And I think that's fine, but we'll never get told the truth. It's up to us to dig in on this extraction operation theory, I believe, my friends. Absurd says, the most compelling evidence you have mentioned is the blood on the foundation and the hole in the story from the roommates and not mentioning blood when finding Xana. Exactly. No mention of blood when finding Xana or anything, no blood mentioned in the 911 call, everyone. That's nuts, isn't it? There's only one reason, because it didn't happen. There wasn't any blood. But Jay Embry won't tell you that, my friends. And so many other YouTubers, unfortunately, don't tell you that. Long ago, I suspected BK may have been recruited to work with the feds for this case. Exactly, absurd. Brilliant comment. I'm going to screenshot your sentence, your comment sometime. Long ago, I suspected BK may have been recruited to work with the feds for this case. I totally agree. I think you're right. If that's the case, he will be found guilty. Oh, and they will kill his identity. BK will be no more. And then he will assume his new identity for his primary role with whatever agency he's working with. Another brilliant comment, I think, by Absurd, my friends. You might be right, Absurd. Maybe he will not get off with a technicality. He'll be found guilty, and they'll, I assume you're sort of saying the feds might relocate him, just like I believe the four beautiful students. They're not dead, they're alive, they're relocated, they're working with the feds in some capacity, protected by the feds. And this again, I think, my friends, you got to look at this theory, as Tommy Jude said in my interview with him on Once Upon a Crime Time, the channel, everyone, right? And I said this story, or this theory, should be celebrated. We don't have to feel sad, my friends. You don't have to keep thinking the IDAHO4 is a terrible tragedy, especially that there was this bloody crime scene and all these stabbings to these beautiful young students. No, it didn't happen. And, you know, in my opinion, and guess what, everyone? You got to think, you know, if Jay Embry and all these other YouTubers are correct and they just want to follow along, and I think Jay Embry, more than other YouTube creators, are trying to convince you that an actual atrocity happened. Sure seems that way. But all these YouTubers like him, they don't get into the meat and potatoes. It was staged crime scene. And if you really believe a Jay Embry that the nice Aryan families came in and they did all these stabbings, got out clean, left two roommates, you know, alive, which makes absolutely no sense. And then they intimidated them, according to Jay Embry. They actually intimidated Dylan and Bethany to not call 911 for 8 or 9 hours. Are you kidding me? Makes no sense. But if you believe all that, you got to think the feds are in Moscow, Idaho, are dumb as a stump, right? And lazy and don't know a goddamn thing. They don't know how to do their job and provide proper security, proper surveillance. But it was the opposite. Again, Steve G admitted to you they had surveillance on the house. Even Jay Embry has to admit, well, he doesn't want to talk about it, but he had to admit they provided security. The feds, yes, they did, Jay Embry, but it wasn't just enough to make the parents feel comfortable. What the hell does that even mean? Do you guys know again, is this something like disinformation agents would tell you, talking this kind of nonsense? Again, my friends, use reason, logic, common sense. The feds absolutely had that house probably wired to the teeth. They knew, again, and look at the night, my friends. The feds would have known that Kaylee had told Maddie, remember she asked Maddie, what did you tell Adam? And Maddie answered, I told Adam everything. The feds would have probably already known that Maddie flopped her lips probably too much, told Adam, I don't know what Adam's role is in all this, my friends. He must have some sort of role, right? Not necessarily he's guilty or anything, but it's very strange. And then we know what Jack's reply was, right? Everyone people that know this case, Jack said, they're going to get you for that, Maddie, right? So I think that's all the more reason, my friends, why the feds, they knew they had to act that night. Please don't believe that Aryan Knights came in and did all these stabbings, brutal unalivings. And you got 6'3", 6'4" Ethan Chapman as well. You're going to be able to take this guy out with 1 or 2 perps and 3 healthy women? And get out, give me a break. No way. I'll never believe that anymore, my friends. Never. And I always had, actually, come to think of it, even from day one, I had troubles believing. How could 1 or more perps actually do this? I mean, with a knife? No way. No way. I don't buy it. And again, my friends, there's no evidence to even support that the atrocity took place. No forensic leaks. Again, no verifiable evidence that the bodies were removed, my friends. And again, we could go on and on. I'll just try to read more of your amazing comments, everyone. I can't keep going up to the phone too often because I blew out my disc last week, unfortunately. Let's see here. Thank you for joining me on these lives, my friends. I hope to do more as long as my internet is going to be good. These were brilliant comments. Now they've stopped for some reason. Huh. I don't know if there's a way to keep scrolling. Oh, no. Tax Max Facts Thunderclap. I like that. Again, I'll read that comment. I mean, you have a point. There have been a few creators that have been proven to be plants since all this happened. Yeah, I agree. Pav is a good guy. I know Pav. All right. You're meaning Jay Embry. Really? Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. But don't you agree? Don't we got to question, who is he? Who is Pav Jay Embry? He comes from the ether out of nowhere. Why does he wear glasses all the time? You know, some people will give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess, and say it's his shtick, right? You're not going to show your eyes? And what about questioning, why is Jay Embry not doing interviews? Why does he refuse to do interviews? Why is he always going solo? If you have so much amazing information to put forward, and if you really are gung-ho, apparently, that the Aryan family did this atrocity, got out clean, then let's see you back it up with somebody that opposes your viewpoint, Jay Embry, like myself. But he won't interview anybody, my friends, or be interviewed. He only did it once that I know of with A.R. Hayes of Convicts Thoughts. And A.R. Hayes apparently also thinks the atrocity happened, even though evidence says the opposite, I believe. But let me just leave the dog and allow her in one more time, my friends, please. Okay? Okay. Oh. Sit. Sorry, everyone. We're back. But I think it's okay to question, my friends, who are the disinformation agents possibly, and in this case? Because do you really want to put up with, just buy into potential disinformation agents, everything they got to say, and just believe that, you just got to question it. Some people think some of these creators have great character and class, and I guess they're full of integrity. Really? Well, Jay Embry, they got this clown. No, I take that back. Embry, you're not a clown. But this guy didn't even have the courtesy, did you, Jay Embry? You didn't show any intellectual integrity and honesty. You did the opposite. You told your audience you forgot my channel's name when you replied to my video exposing you. That's right. He replied to me, everyone. He put out a video, but he didn't say my channel's name. He claimed that he forgot, and he was saying, sorry, I forgot his channel's name, but I'll try to remember at the end of the video. What a bunch of nonsense. When it came on his feed, as he said it did, my video, it was all in big letters, ESTEY'S Crime Maze. I mean, that's the kind of guy we're dealing with, everyone. So, but you can think he's a good guy all you want. I wish he was. And maybe he is in some ways, but I don't trust him, in my opinion, but especially on this case. Watch The Purge, Kane's Nose, show it always live. Not sure, what do you mean by that Leash 23? Watch The Purge, Kane's show it always live. Is that a channel? Let me see when it's on next. Brenda says hi. Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate that, Brenda. Leash says Bethany got engaged and her fiance has a picture of him proposing to her, and a shirt says 4 lifters. Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. I might just screenshot your comment as well, Leash 23. Thank you for that. Yeah, by the way, Leash 23 and everybody, I don't know if Jay Embry's mentioned this. Very few people have, I believe, but if you look at Bethany's history, before 2015, there's nothing. It's been apparently all scrubbed, right? And her parents apparently worked. They agreed to work with the feds for trafficking, right? Drugs, helping them out, I guess, and sex trafficking. So there's a lot of questions about Bethany and the family there. I think she was a CI. Did you see my message about infighting? Tax Max Facts Thunderclap. No, I didn't, Tax Facts. I didn't. Oh, here goes Absurd says, we should question these things, but Pav is solid. He is a private guy. You just have to know his personality. I hope you're right, Absurd. I really hope you're right. That would be wonderful, but you got to also admit, the guy should have said my channel's name at the very least. When you reply to my video, don't say you don't remember. Be honest. Right? And I made the challenge to this private guy, supposedly Jay Embry, if she's correct. Let's do an interview, Jay Embry. If you really think you could back up that the Airy Nice Airing families actually were able to take out this hideous, bloody hit that we've been spoon-fed, I believe, the biggest lie of the case, it didn't happen. But if you want to try to back that up, and I'd love to see you try, here in front of our audiences, Jay Embry, then let's do an interview. Let's see if you try to back it up, not just regurgitate this stuff, man. He can't do it. And I'll show him and our audiences, everyone, he knows I'll show him that it was a staged crime scene. And here's an example, my friends, that Jay Embry has never told you this. He still refuses to go there. And you got to question why. The boxes, Birdie showed you, my friends, the boxes literally has, first of all, some very odd things. It has Bethany's name on it. Beth for Bethany, right? One of the surviving roommates. You had literally uniformed and ununiformed officers moving boxes out. As Birdie said, when do you see that? That's almost unheard of. Usually it's the families involved, right? Why do you have U.S. Marshals moving out this stuff? And the most important, my friends, Jay Embry will never tell you this. And this is what we could bring up in an epic interview. If only he had the courage, would show some balls to do it. And I'd love to do with other YouTube creators is guess what? I talked about it with Tommy Jude, though, in our interview on Once Upon a Crime Time. The box that says North American Relocation Services. How many of you knew that? And I know right away many of you are saying, well, Jason, it's a moving company, right? They're moving shit out of the house, the students. What's the big deal? I'll tell you the big deal in a moment. Absurd says, I forgot your channel too. Oh, well, yeah, but Embry, my friends, the difference is, Absurd, Embry replied to my video exposing him and then forgot my channel name. That makes no sense. Remember, he just didn't want to say it, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I don't need Embry. What was I saying? Oh, the boxes, everyone. To Birdie's researcher, I believe, found this out, that it says North American Relocation Services. And then to Birdie's credit, because he thinks deeply often, he said, geez, I wonder I wonder if North American Relocation Services, do they work with the feds? And guess what? You know what I'm about to say, don't you, my friends? Yes, the answer is absolute yes. The parent company is called Serva. And one day I'll try to find out how to put this on the lives on YouTube, everyone. When hopefully I do future lives, we'll do whole slide presentations for you. I put this out, though, through editing on my videos. You could check it out, my friends. I think I did it even on the Jay Embry Exposed video. Serva, S-I-R-V-A, everyone. They do extraction operations. It's a real federal program and company, my friends. Serva, they work with law enforcement assets, valuable assets to law enforcement. So think like confidential informants, right? They work with federal government officials that are in danger, for example. All this, my friends, right? This is real, my friends. Do you think, how could that be just a coincidence? And again, you got North American Relocation Services on the box, and they didn't treat this crime like a real crime scene half the time. Again, it was staged, everyone, right? Do you not agree with that, my friends? You can agree to disagree, but I wonder how you disagree with that. That company doesn't exist anymore. Exactly, Tax Max Facts, Thunderclap. Bertie was almost certain that company went down the next day, right? Crazy, crazy. Man, it's crazy, scary, Tax Max Facts, Thunderclap. Right on, sweetie. I totally agree with you. Absurd says, that's why I'm saying your name isn't that memorable. No offense, just being honest. Why isn't my name that memorable, Absurd? Maybe it will be in the future if it's not now. Is your buddy Jay Embry, is his name much more memorable? Is it because he's been at this case longer and he has hundreds of videos out? Do you really believe his theory where he's seemingly trying to convince the public, you, that an atrocity took place and by the Aryan Knights, the Aryan family, they took it out? Are you serious? And then he blames the feds that they didn't have enough security. So he blames the feds that they must be the laziest people in the world, didn't do their jobs. And he blames dangerous gangbangers like elements of the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, for a quadruple homicide. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'd want to wear shades too if I put that theory out. My God, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And maybe he's a private individual. Yeah, a lot of feds are hinted, but who knows? You can make it a memorable, Absurd says. Thank you. Thank you. That calms me down, Absurd. I appreciate, because I appreciate you and I appreciate that positive comment. I really do. And I've known his whole life. That's interesting, Absurd. Well, I might have some additional information on your friend Embry that I'm holding close to the vest. And by the way, how did he, a lot of people were talking before I exposed him and had questions about this man, this creator. A lot of people were saying, even before I got on Embry, that is he FBI? It seems like he's worked for law enforcement. It seems like he's got a law enforcement background. Here's an example. He told you in so many words that he knows how drug interdiction teams operate. He was adamant, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were drug interdiction teams that stopped Brian Kohberger twice on the street. How is that? Is that just from some guy that's just doing construction labor? Or a construction company, and then he claimed one of his companies, didn't he say that it was worth millions of dollars? Anyway, you got to ask these questions, my friends, and go over this information that some of these creators, I think, put out, but that's just my opinion. Or you could just buy into it, I guess, and believe it. We all know his criminal history, Absurd. Is that right? Well, I don't even go there. I mean, that's interesting. You feel free to put it down if you want. Yeah, we all know. He used to use drugs. Yeah. And he's on TRT, he admits that too. I challenge him to a boxing fight, my friends. He'll have to stay on his TRT if he wants me to, I'll carry him a few rounds, Jay Embry. Although you're not supposed to underestimate your opponents. But hey, Jay Embry, if you ever listen to this live, like I said in one of my videos and the one I exposed you, I think even my apology video, I actually challenged you again to a boxing fight, dude, if you're up for it. And of course, we'll raise lots of money, hopefully for charity. But it's also with the condition that we do an interview together. That's the real challenge I got for Jay Embry, is an interview. I haven't worked out in over 2 weeks, by the way, or boxed because of my back. And I know Jay Embry boxes. I've seen him hit the big bag. That's good stuff. By the way, my friends, hit a lot of fags, or not fags, pardon me, a lot of feds. A lot of feds. They actually box, right? They keep fit, like a Brian Kohberger, if you believe that maybe Brian Kohberger is a Fed asset. Maybe I think he's connected with the feds in some way, the intelligence community and or FBI. And a lot of these guys will hit the punching bag. They'll jog. You got to keep in shape generally, right? So, just putting it out there. You got to wonder on some of these people. So, and that's great. You got to stay fit. So I've had a lot of fun talking with you so far, everyone, but I've got to keep up my responsibility here and look after these animals. I've got pigs out front. We got chickens, 4 dogs. I mean, the list goes on here. It's been great though. All I know is Tax Max Facts Thunderclap. All I know is I don't know a damn thing about anything, so I observe everything. Keeps me honest. Very good, Tax Max Facts Thunderclap. That's cool. I get a lot of people bashing me. Again, they think Jay Embry is untouchable. They think he's a man of character and seemingly all this class and integrity. And I'm not saying he's not. If you believe that, great. But, I have to deal with the bashing. And yet I'm showing you that he doesn't have the evidence to back up his theory, in my opinion, my friends. There was no atrocity. There's no evidence at all to support Aryan family gangbangers went in and did that hit. Absolutely none. The people in the operation out front was the feds. And Embry will not tell you that. It was the feds. Reason, logic, common sense, in my opinion, my friends, because this was an extraction operation. And we know the feds had surveillance around the house. They had patrols. They weren't going to allow gangbangers to do this quadruple bloody unalivings, no less with a knife? Are you kidding me? And leave 2 roommates alive? Why would gangbangers, and if you believe even Dylan that may have been 3 feet away, like she says, whether it be Brian Kohberger or anybody, or even if she wasn't 3 feet away, why would they allow 2 roommates to be alive when they would have seen or heard everything if they're in the house? Like, come on, it makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. And people have been questioning that for the longest time. Why the 2 roommates, why were they untouched? Why was the 911 call delayed 8 out of 9 hours? Well, I think the extraction operation theory, my friends in the feds, answers those questions, doesn't it? Absurd says there's tons of evidence. The question is whether it's legit or manufactured. Great question. Absurd says they would have had to manufacture the evidence for the trial if your theory is correct. That's right, my friends. Exactly, Absurd. And Jay Embry, he kind of seems like he brags that he goes by the evidence, the court docs. Well, hello, other YouTubers have shown you or told you the feds, especially in a case like this, where it's a huge cover-up to begin with, they can manufacture some of these court docs. And the defense team, if the extraction operation theory is correct, which I think it is, you better believe the defense team, they will absolutely know that an extraction removal operation took place by the feds. They would absolutely know those students are alive and protected under like a WITSEC program, right? And Taylor and defense team will know, but they're not going to tell you, unfortunately, everyone, because they want to keep their job, in my opinion. They're going to go along with the script. You're seeing it now. They're going to bring up alternative perps. The judge will go along with it. My friends, I'm telling you, it's one big psyop. We don't have to just believe that an atrocity happened because there's no evidence to support it. And let's look at this extraction removal operation. And by the way, again, my friends, it's legally binding. The feds, U.S. Marshals, FBI, they could legally stage a violent event. They could fake deaths, man. If a confidential informant has been compromised, they could legally stage a violent event. But you're not going to hear that from some of these YouTube creators, particularly disinformation agents out there, my friends, or that may be out there. I think clearly there's some, but I won't say who it is exactly. I'd put out my suspicions. Vicky R says, this sounds like a psychological operation right now, using it to pick a fight with Pav. Laugh out loud. Distraction is always the goal. Well, Vicky R, the only distraction I think is from certain creators out there. Who am I trying to distract? I'm telling you what Pav has put out. And you can believe it or you cannot believe it. But I've challenged him to an interview. That's not distraction. And would be up to somebody like Pav, who I directly challenged for an interview, to show some courage and balls. You didn't name my channel. You deliberately, seemingly did that on purpose. You claim you forgot. How can you forget? He's a very smart individual. He replied to my video. So at the very least, let's do an interview. Let's see if you can back up what you say, Jay Embry. I say your name. Why don't you say my name? Huh? Jason ESTEY'S crime maze. Anyway, I'm half teasing with all of you. It's all good, man. Jay Embry will never, I don't think, ever have the courage to interview me, but you know, it's all good. To BF Luddy. And by the way, I used to believe in Jay Embry. I supported this guy, and then, but once you look, my friends, please keep an open mind. Just look from a different lens. Can you do that? Just like Bert says, look from a different lens and actually look at the law. See, again, Embry's not going to tell you this. He showed you the basics of the WITSEC protection program, but he doesn't tell you, because the FBI are not going to tell you this openly, that they could stage a violent event if confidential informant's been compromised. But you can look it up, my friends. It's there. It's in law. Hello. Okay? And again, my friends, if a confidential informant's in trouble, if their lives are in danger, they'll do extraction removal operations. So why wouldn't that have taken place in the IDAHO4? Are we just going to believe Nancy Grace and Ashley Banfield and a lot of the YouTube creators that just run with the atrocity actually taking place? I did too. I was guilty of that myself, my friends. I bought into this nonsense for about a year and a half. And then as soon as I looked from a different lens, again, looking at the extraction removal operation, looking at the fact that there's no evidence, no verifiable evidence at all that any bodies were even removed, everyone, and no open casket ceremony for any of the four. I mean, you could say, well, that's a coincidence, right? But is it really? Because in extraction removal operations, by the way, everyone, you will never, ever have a public open casket ceremony. It doesn't happen, right? Because when they rescue somebody, if they're staging a violent event, you know, you can't exhume their bodies because they're not dead. They're not unalived. So, and it's too hard to fake a huge open casket public ceremony. It doesn't happen. And it didn't happen in this case. Why? Because I think they're alive, my friends. Ethan Chapman apparently was the only one that had a private funeral service. But it wasn't an open public casket ceremony regardless. Okay, everyone? And by the way, again, my friends, I have some sympathy, by the way, towards the parents. But I also get very angry at Steve G. He's receiving a lot of money, apparently, from the public, over $80,000, and asking for money, even if you believe his daughter has been unalived. That's why a lot of people are angry at Steve G. I think he's there to lie to the public, largely, in my opinion, my friends. Okay? He's probably a Fed, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And by the way, my friends, Ethan Chapman family, did you know, apparently, and Bertie talked about this, they said they're not even angry at the assailant. I don't know if they believe Brian Kohberger, what suppose he did the crime or what. If you believe the crime happened, if you believe the parents actually think it happened. But my friends, they said they weren't even angry. Are you kidding me? Are your beloved son, we're supposed to believe, was stabbed to death, apparently stabbed in his lower legs at first, all this nonsense in my opinion. Your beloved son was unalived in the most unimaginable, brutal way. Stabbings. And you're not mad at who did it? Are you kidding me? We got to question some of this behavior, I think, my friends, or just, you know, I don't know, it's just weird too. And I think, again, the good news, my friends, I think if I were a betting man, I bet Ethan Chapman's alive. The strong, handsome Ethan Chapman and his girlfriend, Xander Canoodle, I think she's alive too. And I think some of these students may well have been targeted, and probably were, because, as some people have said, Xander Canoodle's stepmother was probably one of the confidential informants, and she very well may have ratted on some evildoers, my friends. And yes, they may have wanted to get epic retribution, my friends. But there's no way they could have got to those students. There's no way. The feds were all over it. They knew what was going on. They had to have. in my opinion, my friends. They absolutely had to. And Steve G admitted to you, even though I normally don't believe Steve G, but he admitted they had surveillance around the house. They absolutely did. Okay, everyone? So anyway, I hope I made my points here, everyone. I had a lot of fun answering your questions and comments. I totally agree with Vicky R that it sounds like a psychological operation. But I think she was insinuating that I'm trying a psychological operation. No, Vicky, sweetie, I'm the only one that I know of on YouTube that actually, in several videos, and I'm going to keep doing, I define to you what a PSYOP is, psychological operations. You know, sometimes, often people will bring up the word PSYOP in this case and other cases, but they don't define it to you. I don't have time right now to define what a PSYOP is again, but I will in future lives and other videos too. And it's so important, my friends. And once you understand what a PSYOP is, I think you really start to we can understand the truth of what went down largely on November 13, 2022, in my opinion. Okay? And the lies that were being fed and the manipulation. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone. And again, it's okay to agree to disagree. Hopefully I have just as many people agreeing with my theory or looking into it right now. And we'll talk more about that staged crime scene in the future, everyone. I meant to go over a list. This is just one of many lists we could make of the huge red flags that I believe shows that it was a staged operation, a staged, crime scene, right? False flag operation. I'm telling you. Anyway, thank you, everyone. I got to go. My name's Jason, of course, ST's Crime Ace. Thanks for hopping on this live. As I like to say sometimes too, if perhaps you think I have value to share with humanity, or even if you just enjoy my videos, I hope you'll subscribe, smash that like button, okay? And hit the bell icon to be notified for future videos. Apparently, that all helps with the algorithms. And feel free to leave me a comment, like many of you did today. Appreciate it. And we'll do more videos, of course, on the IDAHO4. And eventually, we'll cover other crime cases. I did one video on the Karen Reed trial, too. Anyway, thanks, everyone. Have an amazing, beautiful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. By the way, Harsh Reality, huge channels like that. He does some good work, but people like him and so many others, they run with the atrocity narrative, the FBI narrative. They don't run against it. They don't talk about, apparently, well, wait, where's the evidence to even show the atrocity took place? Think about that, everyone. Think about that. And I hope more people might hop on to this, I think, real legitimate theory that this was most like an extraction removal operation. Again, it should be celebrated. The students were not unalive. They're alive. They're protected. The feds did their job. Can I be any more clear? I don't think so. I got to let the dog in. Thanks, everyone. Bye.